Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's July 30, 2019, and this is episode 670. Today I share an inspiring conversation with photographer, musician and author Marc Silber, in which we discuss some of his awesome life experiences, many of which play a key part in his new book called Create, Tools from Seriously Talented People to Unleash Your Creative Life. I actually recorded this podcast a couple of months ago now, and I'm about a week late in releasing this because I was finishing our travelogue series from Namibia, but you can see some of the notes that I made before and during our conversation, as well as a few of the images that we talk about, mainly screenshots that I shot of Marc during our conversation on Skype. But you can find that and links to the book and everything at mbp.ac/670. So that's 670. So here you are. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Marc Silber. So Marc, welcome to the show.
Martin, I'm so happy to join you. Thanks for inviting me.
Not at all. I really am. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. Obviously, I've read through your book, and I think it's probably one of the most important pieces that I've read for a long while, as in, educational wise, but also the trouble that you've gone to do a lot of the stuff. And I'm sure it's a labor of love, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I'm really looking forward to talking today about your new book, which is called Create. And it's going to drop on the day that we release this. So congratulations.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you. That's also my birthday, by the way.
Really? Oh, okay. Yeah. That's cool. That's very cool. So before we start to talk about your book, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into photography and how it all started?
Well, it's interesting. I was one of those kids that used to take pictures with a Brownie camera. And I would take the rolls of film to the drugstore, and they came back very small and very disappointing. And one day, my 7th grade teacher asked me if I wanted to see how the darkroom worked. And I said, yeah, that would be interesting. So he basically showed me how to develop a roll of film. And then the magic occurred when we put it in the enlarger and made prints. I think there were maybe 8x10s even. They were at least 5x7.
Yeah, wow. But
they weren't all muddy and coming out through a drugstore machine.
Yeah.
And that was it. I was hooked. I went back to our school, and there was an old darkroom that had gone into sort of disrepair and had cobwebs all over it. And I cleaned it out and just started using it. And then I built a darkroom at home in our laundry room. And from that point on, I was a photographer. So really since age 12. And as a matter of fact, I actually sold a couple of photographs. There are 2 or 3 photos from that age range in the book. So
the one with the jumping off the dunes?
The jumping off one, yeah.
That's brilliant. Classic.
Thank you. That was, it's funny to this day, that's my most sold photograph, even though by then I was in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
But, Martin, I just kept going from there, and I was largely self-taught. I did go to the San Francisco Art Institute in San Francisco, where Annie Leibovitz was also. She was a couple of years older than me, so I actually didn't really hang out with her. But I met her years later, and we were like, wow, old home week. But I've always, I've been a photographer since that age, and I've always been involved in some creative activity, writing or design or, music. And so this book kind of came out of all those experiences.
Yeah, yeah. So I noticed in your book that you got a photo of Annie Leibovitz, and I thought that was really cool. I mean, I just obviously I'm in awe of everything that she does, and as most people are. The also the dunes shot, and you recalled in your book you included a passage from, I think it was, you said that the lady who was the girl on the left in the photograph.
Yes.
That's amazing how you managed to sort of, because the whole magic of actually not just jumping off a dune with friends at that age, but having the photograph. And that you mentioned was a good part of the whole experience. And that's so true, isn't it? How just taking a photograph or making a photograph changes an experience from being just an everyday one to something that's actually quite magical.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of hit on the whole creative experience. Why do we love doing things that are creative? Why does it give us so much joy? I think it's because you're capturing those moments. You're telling a story, whether it's a visual story or a written story or even a song.
Yeah.
Takes that moment. I was talking to my wife about the Beatles. To me, I find it fascinating how they're having a whole new sort of generation of Beatle fans, Beatle maniacs.
Yeah.
But it was the same thing. How those guys, for me growing up, it was like the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Was formed by them, but they were also so creative in so many different areas,
Yeah, they made movies and all sorts, didn't they?
Movies and poetry and drawings, and their albums by themselves were a work of art.
Yeah.
And I think I was inspired by that growing up. So it's been, as you say, if you can capture a moment like that and then share it with others, it really has lasting memories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recall a photograph from your book of a John Lennon memorial I think it was in San Francisco as well, near the front. So I thought that there was probably a connection there, but
Yes.
So I really like in your book you emphasize the fact that for some people their lives are creative. It's not as much as we sort of switch into a creative mode. Their whole life is creative, and I feel as though that since I've been doing the photography myself also since my teens, but I made it my profession some 15 years ago, and I actually started doing it full time only 10 years ago. So for me, it's a relatively new thing. But I love the fact that everything I do, when I get up, from the moment I get up until the moment I go to bed, I feel as though I'm being creative in some way or another. And
That's
so,
fantastic.
and it was great to see this in your book because I've not really seen that angle before. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting too. The people that I interviewed, I selected them from a wide variety of just backgrounds because I wanted to show a couple of things. I wanted to show that it isn't that some people are born creative and some people aren't, or you're just naturally creative. These people actually had to work at it. And you can see from their stories, they all did. But they also wanted to have that kind of life. They didn't want to have a 9-to-5 job. They wanted to have a life that did have creativity in many different areas. Like Chris Burkhardt, who is a phenomenon on Instagram, talked about how, he could foster creativity with his children.
Yeah.
And encourage them and not so much teach them things, but kind of create a way for them to find it on their own. And a couple of other people said the same thing.
Yeah. I think there's a whole storm of things coming through my mind as we speak here.
Let it rain.
I'm probably going to forget half of it before I get to it. But I mean, the first thing that I thought of there as well was, although, I had some experience as a kid. I was not a good student at school. I didn't have a great school experience. But I do recall my mum was always relatively supportive of things that I wanted to do. If I was to sit down with a pad and some pencils, she'd give me a few sort of droplets of praise here and there, and she'd have me send them off to some of the kiddie programs on the TV because it was cool, and I got one shown there once, and so nice. Things like that were great. But I really feel that having read your book, a lot of the stuff that started to come home for me was that I used to also say, and this was a number of years ago that I'm not a very creative person. And you get into this in the book as well, and the reasons why people often think that. But I feel as though it was the self-awareness that you talk about that really made me start to realize that I actually am relatively creative in a number of ways. I mean, I've created a lifestyle for myself, and that's another reason why this is all coming together for me really well. It's like a perfect storm. I'm thinking, you know, everything I do, just creating my business, making my business work is an act of creativity. I'm really interested in the fact that you also you have a musician in your profile, and I mean,
a couple of them actually.
I know that we don't have the. This is going to be audio only, but you probably see behind me I have keyboards and things.
Yeah,
I've been in bands since I used to sing and play sax in a band when I was a teenager, and
it was saxophone.
Yeah, I mean that was me just trying to be cool. You know, that what a good instrument to play that might be cool. Oh, a saxophone. Yeah, that's the sexiest thing on the planet. So. But you know, that's in the past. But since then, I have always enjoyed. You know, my way of relaxing, as soon as I made photography my full-time job, I needed to go, I needed something outside of it again. So the first thing I did was bought a keyboard and started to try to practice, you know, music again. And I've always had some sort of an instrument in my life. So all of these things, it's like I say, it's all coming together. You can tell I'm bubbling to talk about lots of different things here.
I can feel it. Well, you know, Ansel Adams, he had an interesting story. He was trained as a classical pianist, and he hit a point in his life where he started really falling in love with photography, and he had to make a choice. He said, I can't pursue both professionally. So even though he continued to play the piano, he decided to go off in the direction of photography. Yeah. And there's definitely such an overlap, especially in his super scientific approach to photography and music, for that matter. There's such an overlap between the two mediums, you know. Yeah, I agree. I've always been inspired in my darkroom days. I always had music playing while I was developing and printing. It became an essential ingredient to the whole experience.
Yeah, wow. You know, I watched a very moving documentary here at the weekend with my wife. It was aired in December last year, I think it was, but we just got to watch it over the weekend. And it was about Eugene Smith.
Fantastic.
And he did a project here in Japan shortly before he died, and something that happened here actually contributed to him dying at 59, which is a shame. But he documented the Minamata people, where there was the mercury that was being poured into the sea, and people got disfigured, and he in that there was a scene where he used to, in this old rundown Japanese home that he rented in the Minamata town, where he used to do his developing to Janis Joplin's "Summertime." And that's like a classic. That's a classic track, you know. And so all through this Japanese documentary, there was parts in the background where you could hear Janis Joplin with that gravelly voice.
Absolutely,
and it was so moving. I mean, I ended up I had a few tissues by the side of my chair by the time we'd finished watching it. But
that's fantastic.
Excellent documentary. You know what? I'll try and find that actually. See if there's.
I would like to. Send me a link if you do. I'd love to watch it.
I doubt that I'll be able to find it, but because things are very like we don't really have. We have Netflix now. I'll see if I can find a link of some way of embedding it, because it was an amazing. That was an amazing documentary. So let's see. Tell us. You know, in your conversation with, I'm going to talk about a few of the things in your book, and we try not to spoil it by going through all of them. Because, but you talked with Chris Burkott, who you mentioned earlier, and he touches on the fact that there are no shortcuts. Success comes from years of hard work, and goes on to say that there's an entitlement mentality in society, and I think that. So true. You know, I've had people ask me, for advice on how do you do this? How did you become successful? And I mean, at the moment, it's still negotiable as to how successful I am, and definitely compared to some people, not very. But
Yeah.
it's I sort of tongue in cheek say, well, actually, I worked really hard. I made a podcast every week for 14 years at the moment, and it takes
Congrats
a lot
on that, by the way. That's pretty amazing. I read that. I thought that you must have been one of the first podcasters.
I was. There was only 2 other podcasts in iTunes when I started. Photography podcasts. Sorry, there was others, but photography podcast. I was the 3rd in iTunes, and so there's been a lot of dedication and hard work that's gone into. And sure, it's been happening over it's been 10 years since I started my business, but I like to emphasize to people that it doesn't happen overnight. There are no magic bullets.
Yeah, and it takes work. And,
absolutely.
That which is in the book I talk about the cycle of photography, which might be a good time to introduce this concept.
Absolutely,
here.
yeah.
So we have 5 stages. The first is visualization.
Yeah.
And that just means your idea, your mental concept of what it is you're trying to create, whether it's a photograph or you're playing music or you're drawing something or you're decorating your house. You first have to have the vision of it.
Yeah.
From there, you have to know your tools. And again, whatever tools you're using. Bob Holmes, who I've interviewed a number of times on my channel, my YouTube channel, is a fantastic travel photographer. And he says, don't let the camera get in the way of your photography.
Yeah.
And too many people let the camera get in the way of their photography. They get so enamored with the camera that they forget it's just a tool. But also you need to know how to use that tool very, very well so you can do it almost instinctively.
Yeah.
But then you get to the phase of work, what we call working your craft, which means go to work. And you've worked at this, podcast. Writing a book is work. You don't just,
absolutely.
You have to sit down. I'm not a very good typist, so it's double work for me because I'm always fixing my typos. But you work at it, and the same thing is true with photography. It's a bit. If you have a business, you got to work at it. Even if it isn't a business and you're serious about it, you have to go to work.
Yeah,
it doesn't imply that it's unpleasant at all. I mean, work should be fun.
Yeah,
but then once you've worked your craft, then you go through the editing stage. Whether it's again, if it's music or you're tweaking the sound or you're going into the darkroom or digital darkroom, whatever it is, you're editing it. And then finally you share it with others. But, Chris said he was a 10-year overnight success. And you put 10 years of hard work into something and then it looks like it's very sudden.
Yeah.
But it took all that time for it to really coalesce and the sparks to gather. And I think that's often, maybe that's one of the misconceptions about creatives is everything is sort of easy for them.
Yeah.
And, in my book, I interviewed enough different people to show that they're just people like the rest of us. They had to overcome all sorts of things just like the rest of us. And they had to rack up their credit cards and almost, go bankrupt like the rest of us do sometimes.
Yeah.
But they persisted and they made it happen. And I think that's one of the key attributes.
Yeah. I going on, I think one of the next interviews you included was Camille Seaman.
Yeah.
And just like Chris, there was a part in there about the importance of knowing what makes you happy and what makes you unhappy.
Yeah.
And I have, there's a couple of things that I want to say on that. One is I was asked a few years ago how I ensure that I'm successful in the things that I do. And I said, I only do things that I want to do, that I'm happy about. And I've built my business around doing things that bring pleasure to me. And it's a very selfish way of working, but I think it's also the reason why I can produce quality products and the reason I can devote a day, 2 days a week to creating the podcast. Because it's stuff that I enjoy doing. I still enjoy doing this, and I can't see me not enjoy doing it. It's part of my life. And so I've music. Because I enjoy music, and because YouTube slap um, copyright claims on anything that you use, even if you buy a license for it.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Because of that as well, but mainly because I enjoy doing it. I make my own music for my slideshows. It's often I can put a slideshow together of photography in a day, and it'll take me 2 weeks to make some music for it, but I enjoy doing it. And so when it's all part of, I find that making that decision, that conscious decision to find what you like and then find how to make that a part of your business is a big part of it. And that's why, again, I was so happy to see this when you was talking, when you're with your interview with Camille.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I really hope happens with this book is I'm trying to reach those people who feel like they long for a more creative life. Maybe they got a 9-to-5 job that they're just doing to pay the bills, but they dream of one day being an artist of some kind.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to appeal to those people that really there's a roadmap, and I want to give you a roadmap. So it isn't just a bunch of high-flown platitudes, but really here's the way you can actually set out from wherever you are now to achieving that goal, because you've achieved that. And that's what most people, I believe, would really like to have, is a creative existence that's sustainable.
Yeah.
And that they can, not just turn to every now and then.
Yeah. I've had conversations with David Duchemin, a friend of mine who I've traveled with him a number of times. He's also a best-selling author, incredibly creative and talented person. And he, when we've talked, we get onto the subject sometimes of how I'm kind of going either side of the rails here, but I also have conversations with people that I travel with. I travel with a lot of very talented photographers on my workshops and tours. I go all over the world with them. And one of the common things that comes up is that I think that there is two ways to live this. Well, there's obviously as many ways as there are people, but there are two main ways to live the life that we're talking about, in that if you make it your profession, then it could be, and unless you're one of the cream of the crop, you're not going to make enough money to really be in a situation to be 100% financially secure. But so in those cases, sticking with the day job, doing, a lot of people I travel with are actually retired now, but a lot of them had very, very high level, what we would consider high level jobs in society. And they've got enough money to enjoy it as a passionate hobby. And I think that for some people, it's better to stick with the day job and financially enable yourself to be creative and do the things that we love doing in your spare time, or create spare time for
That's
it.
Right. That's right.
Rather than jumping in and trying to make it your a full-time living.
And try to live off peanut butter and top ramen while you're struggling along as an artist.
Yeah,
I agree with you. And that's the thing. It really, I think it boils down to what is your passion and what's the best roadmap to get there. What's the best way for you to get there?
Yeah, I think,
and everybody's going to be a bit different.
Exactly. So you recall, if I recall correctly myself, falling out of you had an experience falling out of a tree that I read in the book. Tell us a little bit about that. What was that all about?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's funny, Martin. I have never told very many people about that experience. Really? I just kind of, one of those things that just sort of locked itself away. But the school that I went to was a kind of an unusual school in California, and we used to go off on these school trips twice a year. And this was in the 8th grade. We were traveling down the coast of California. We went camping, and being preteens, kind of looking for fun and adventure, we pulled into our camp spot and then somebody started a water fight. So I was soaking wet.
Mm.
I'm going to tell you the full story.
Please do, yeah.
This is the unedited version. Anyway, so after getting soaking wet, a friend of mine and I decided to kind of explore around the area, and we came across these pine trees. Well, what do 12-year-old boys kind of do?
Yeah.
We decided to climb up these trees and pee off the top of, he was on one side and I was on the other. We're going to pee off the top of these trees. And for the women listening, they might think, boy, do these guys really do that kind of stuff? Yes, we really did. My tree happened to be cut off at the top. And for some reason, I didn't really look at it very closely. And I didn't see why it was cut off at the top until I got up to the top. I noticed there were 2 power lines up there. So I thought, wow, I better be careful and not touch those.
Yeah.
So I did my little business. And then on the way down, I turned around and brushed my shoulder against one of the power lines. And here I am soaking wet. And I bounded out of that tree. It was like an explosion and hit the branches on the way down. Boom, boom, wow. Boom, boom. The only possible positive thing about it is because I had been shocked, I really was limp. And so it was like a bag of wheat hitting the branches.
Yeah, yeah.
So I hit the ground and I thought I was dead.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, that's it. So my friend came, tearing down his tree, running over to me. And I said, I'm dead. Did I die? What happened? Yeah. He says, you're not dead. You're not dead. And it had an amazing experience. It had an amazing effect for me because something, gave me this viewpoint on being alive. All of a sudden, it was like coming up for air.
Yeah.
If you've ever been held down in water and you can't breathe, I'm a surfer, so I've had that experience.
Yeah.
And you finally get a breath of air. It's just so exhilarating. And it was like that, but it was on a huge magnitude of joy experienced by that.
Yeah.
And later that same day, I took that photograph of the kids jumping
from the dune. Yeah.
From the sand dunes. It was one of them, it was like this remarkable experience. It just sort of, they came at the same moment,
Wow.
But that's the story of that visualization that I had.
Yeah. I 9 years ago, actually, it was the year after I started my business, I found out I had thankfully a benign, but I had a brain tumor. And,
oh, wow.
And that at the time, a number of people said to me, because it was obviously one of those experiences where I could have died. I had to have surgery and
sure.
And everything was sort of really scary time. And a lot of people asked me how I felt about it. And I sort of recalled this as I read that passage that, I didn't have this really sort of a biblical experience where I could say it's changed my life and everything. But the thing is, it did give me a huge appreciation for life and just the fact that I'm still here. And I recalled that, it's like you were there. I'm dead. And then all of a sudden I'm alive. And that really sort of all came back to me as I read those words as well.
Well, another sort of angle on that kind of experience is the interview I did with Chris McCaskill, who is the CEO and co-founder of SmugMug, which is a great photo sharing site.
Absolutely.
They went on to buy Flickr, so they kind of have the whole industry there. But Chris grew up homeless on the streets of Oakland, which is a very rough city across the bay from San Francisco.
Yeah, wow.
And he went on to get his MBA at Stanford and work with Steve Jobs and became a serial entrepreneur. But he said, a day doesn't go by that he isn't so appreciative of the things of life. Having a warm meal, being able to sleep in your own bed, getting on a bus and going somewhere. These are things that when you're homeless, you don't do any of those things.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's those experiences, I think, can really sometimes they shake us out of the taking everything for granted, and you have to appreciate life.
Absolutely.
It's really important.
Absolutely. And I still do. I feel as though I'm still enjoying every moment of it. And in your book I've got a note here on page 55. You wrote, "I'm so grateful that I made creativity a major part of my life. It has kept me young by causing me to continue to imagine." And I love that sentiment. I just wanted to bring it up here, that my wife often calls me well, at the moment, for this year at least, she calls me a 52-year-old schoolboy. And like I can be sitting there. I got my first Apple Watch a few days ago, and I'm like there on the sofa playing with it, and I'm showing her the different faces, and she's just sitting there calling me. She says, "You're a 52-year-old schoolboy."
Oh, that's great. My dad, who lived to almost 99.
Wow.
Yeah, he had all these interests in his life. One of them was calligraphy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he wasn't an artist per se, but his calligraphy was beautiful. And it was just one of his pursuits that definitely kept him young and vibrant.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, just having something that you do, something that you enjoy. I mean, this thing, we keep coming back to the fact that there are things that we enjoy doing, and they keep you. I think they give you a reason to just be here sometimes.
I agree.
If everything,
it's a purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And you talk about purpose in your book as well.
Yeah. Purpose is really the fire. It's sort of like I always envision it not like an on-off switch, but more like a rheostat that you can have it on very, very low, and sort of your life is going to parallel that. It's going to feel kind of low and like a dim light.
Yeah.
Or you can learn how to turn it up.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me writing the book and then talking to people about it has been a new level of inspiration. And those conversations have ranged anywhere from just casually with people who ask me what I'm doing, and I tell them, I'm writing about creativity.
Yeah.
And often I'll hear, well, I'm not a very creative person. I really could use that book. But then I find that really they have a misconception of what it means to be creative.
Yeah.
You can be creative by cooking a great meal or designing a beautiful room or being a good teacher, or you don't have to be a quote creative in the sense of this is your full-time profession.
Yeah.
It's something that you do to add life to whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great to actually be sitting here talking directly to you and having read the book as well. It's really nice to get that straight from you. You talked earlier on. You mentioned briefly tools, and in chapter 4 you go into the tools that we use, and I thought it was it was refreshing. You quoted Jeff Dunterman, says that a good tool improves the way you work, a great tool improves the way you think. And
yes.
I find it so refreshing because it's been sort of, it's been popular for a few years to sort of totally discount tools as being, they're not, it's nothing about the tools and all of this. But I think that, you talk about the aesthetic of the tool, and I've long been a proponent of the fact that having good tools and having things that you actually care about, you like using, can feed the creative process. So
absolutely,
it's nice to see you go into that.
Martin, a couple of things. One, I think Benjamin Franklin said, the most important investment you can make is your tools. And I would add to that knowing how to use them as well.
Yeah.
But the thing about a tool is it is what enables you to get from your vision to actually something there in the physical universe. Otherwise, it would all just be a mental exercise.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny, this is going to really date me, but, growing up in the 60s, we had this publication called the Whole Earth Catalog.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And you've probably
heard of
it.
it. Yeah.
Maybe not seen one.
No.
But I actually knew the publisher and the guy his name was Stuart Brand.
Yeah.
And the Whole Earth Catalog was a collection of tools. I think the subtitle was Access to Tools. And you open this thing up, and it was really just descriptions of every kind of imaginable tool that you could think of.
Wow.
Not always physical tools.
Yeah.
I mean, the tool might be in terms of a book that you could read to understand how to raise a certain kind of crop or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's the access to tools. And if you look at creativity, you have to have tools, whether it's a guitar or a keyboard or a recording device or a paintbrush or a camera or whatever. Those are tools.
Yeah. But
one thing I really caution people against, and I think I put it in the book, is don't get so hung up on them. Don't geek out on tools. And this is one of my pet peeves about photography, as I see too many people getting geeked out about the equipment and forgetting that it really is a tool, and you give a cheap camera to a really good photographer and they'll come back with great photographs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In fact, I interviewed Teru Kuamea, he's on my YouTube site, is a war photographer, and he would use cheap throwaway cameras because he didn't want to take expensive equipment into this war zone.
Yeah.
And he came back with the most amazing photographs with just throwaway cameras and toy cameras.
Yeah.
So it's just proof that, it's good to have tools, good to have great tools, but just don't make that the end in itself.
Absolutely.
It's just a means to an end.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that and that's why I do understand that a lot of the conversation about the fact that it's not about the tools, it's not about the cameras, that's what they're trying to relay.
Yeah.
And so I understand that, but I fully understand that, from my own perspective, picking up a piece of equipment or a tool or something, not necessarily photographic, but anything, picking up something that feels quality and you've bought it, but you've maybe got the extra model up because you wanted something a little bit more special, and just feeling the connection with those sort of tools helps us to be creative. A lot of the time, get a new lens, and what do? The first thing you do is stick it on your camera and go out for a walk and start to shoot with it. And so it can be the impetus for getting us out and for doing that stuff. But you also, and of course, the important thing is you talk about how you buy stuff because you have a requirement. You've got some purpose that you have to fulfill. And and that's the important thing. I mean, I made a rule for myself a number of years ago, and I've broken it with one lens. But if I don't use a lens for a year, I sell it. And so
that's good advice.
Yeah, I mean, I although I would love to still own my original Canon D30, the 3 megapixel camera, the first one that I bought that cost me more money than I thought I'd ever spend on a camera. I would love to still own that, but that paid for half of my 10D, and so I've literally just sold 2 5DSRs because I wanted to get a second EOS R, my mirrorless. And so, but I'm enjoying the equipment. I'm enjoying this new format, and it's feeding my creativity once again. So, yeah,
it does. I know people won't be able to see this because we're on a podcast, but this was a DJI Osmo.
Yeah. You know what? Hold that up again, and I will do a quick screenshot.
Okay. So this is one of my newest tools that I added to my collection. What's amazing about this little device is it's got this incredible gimbal on it, so you can go out and get these really smooth shots. Yeah, it's what 4.5 inches by an inch, and you can put it in your pocket and carry it around with you. I've used this on professional video shoots. Yeah, where I want to get a smooth pan, and this is a tool that opens up all sorts of possibilities. Yeah. So
I saw that you have a photo of lots of different tools on your desk or a workbench or something. And I saw that on there. I thought I recognized it. They are great, aren't they? I mean, I have a one of the handles, I forget what you call it, but it's one of the Osmos where you can actually just mount a phone in there.
Yes.
And I often use that as a gimbal and just sort of use it to stabilize my iPhone as I'm shooting with that.
Exactly.
And they're all great tools.
They're tools, and it allows you to get this level of production that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. Because you just try to hold your iPhone, it's not going to be smooth.
Yeah.
It's going to wobble all over the place.
Exactly.
But I believe that that's the value of tools. Yes. And I agree with you on the aesthetic part of it. It's interesting. This is a knife my dad gave me, and you might want to.
Yeah.
And this has, I don't use it for anything, but it's just got this. The beauty of it is really something.
Yeah.
And sometimes we keep stuff, and I talk about in the book of, just like you said, if you don't really use it, get rid of it. But sometimes we keep things just because they do have an aesthetic and a beauty to them, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Could you just hold that up in front of the camera? I
Yeah,
couldn't
sure.
quite get it. I'll grab a little bit higher.
Let me turn it around because it's got this cool.
Yeah, if a little bit higher, I can't quite see it.
Oh yeah, sorry.
There you go. Oh, look at that. That's got character.
And I'll open it here. Yeah, my dad gave this to me. Oh wow, I was maybe 20 years old or something.
Yeah, excellent.
And you keep these things around because they're cool.
Yeah.
But so learning to use tools, again, with photography, you have to get good enough with your equipment so you don't have to think about it and let it get in the way.
Mm. So we talked a little bit earlier about music and the fact that, I realized that you're a musician as well. Do you feel as though there are many parallels between the creative struggle of a musician as compared to a photographer? I'm sort of feeding the question here because I know what I think I know what you're going to say. But have you always drawn parallels between the two?
I haven't actually put too much thought to that, but I do know, for instance, in Ansel Adams' case and myself, and I do think that, it really boils down to the creative process. I am an amateur musician.
Yeah.
I've never broken out of, I actually learned to play blues harmonica pretty well.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
And I can still get up and, play along with the blues band.
Yeah.
But, guitar, I never got beyond just playing some chords and singing along with it.
Yeah.
But I think that, we're dealing with a mathematical expression.
Yeah.
And any creative field, certainly photography, you can relate everything to mathematics.
Yeah.
And, really look at the parallels there. Mm-hmm. But I think the real parallel comes down to just the fact that you have a creative outlet, whether it's, a visual thing or a music expression or writing. I feel that all these things come back to the same urge, which is to get your story out there.
Yeah. Excellent. So, I don't want to spoil this by going through every chapter. I would love for people to pick up your book and just have the same sort of rush that I had as I rarely read. I have to be honest with you. I rarely read books, but I devoured yours over the weekend I picked it up and I thought, okay, so I better take a look at this because I'm scheduled to talk with Marc in a few days, and I just couldn't put it down. So I really, really thank you for making it available, putting it out to the world, and
thank you.
I'd love for you to let us know where people can go to get the book.
Absolutely. I wanted you kind of sparked something I wanted to mention before I do that. At the end of each chapter, so. Here's the thing. Yeah. I wanted to write a book that wasn't just going to be a mental exercise, but would actually, as I said earlier, give people a roadmap. So at the end of each chapter, I have two things that I do. I have summary. So I ask questions that I feel are really important to put. You can either put it down in writing or think it through. I encourage people to put it in writing in their notebooks.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is action steps, so that you actually take action, because as we were saying, there has to be some work involved for these changes to occur. You can't just think about it. You actually have to do something. So every chapter ends with that.
Yeah.
And I'm really going to be curious, and I really want to hear back from people who have gone through these exercises and hear their successes.
Yeah.
And I encourage them to go to Instagram and hashtag their notebook and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, the book is available pretty much, anywhere books are sold, certainly on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and the indie books.
Yeah.
You can go to my website and you'll find a link to the to these various places. You can go to Amazon. Just search my name, Marc Silber. Make sure you spell it Marc Silber. You'll find the book that way.
Okay.
But if you go to my website, the other thing you'll find is a resource page that goes along with the book. So everything that I mentioned will give you a handy link to that, to the people I've interviewed and to the things that we talk about in the book.
Yeah. That's a great point. I had meant to mention the exercises that you put in each chapter. They are very useful. I haven't, obviously, having run through the book quickly, I haven't done them, but I'll go back and take a look at some of those. But all very, very, it's great to hammer home the stuff that you read, the people read about. Until you actually do something, it's quite easily just vaporize and be gone before you know it.
Exactly.
So can you just spell out your website for the sake of people that are, not in front of the computer?
So it's Silber, and that's my name, SILB like boy, ER, Studios, STUDIOS.com.
Okay.
Silberstudios.com.
Yeah. And if people are at a computer, I'll tell everybody where to go to get this as well. So,
fantastic.
Marc, thank you so much. I really have enjoyed having this great. It's my morning here. It's your evening, and I know that I've kept you at your desk a little bit longer than you probably would have hoped to have been. So, thank you very much for your time,
Martin. My pleasure. And one of the things I talk about in the book is the joy of going out on a walk every day.
Yeah,
and that's what I'll be doing next.
Oh, excellent! How late is it light there at this time of year? Is you still got a few hours of light left?
Oh yeah, it's not. The sun really doesn't set, I think, until a little after 8 o'clock, and then we've still got twilight all the way to 8:30 now. So we've got quite a bit of light left.
Excellent. And I was fondly recalling you talked about Route 1 in your book a number of times, and I was fortunate enough to rent a friend of mine's car a few years ago and drive all the way down Route 1 to go and see the folks that really write stuff when they were in San Luis Obispo. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's I didn't have a lot of time, so I didn't get to really jump out and photograph very much, but driving down there, that all came flooding back to me over the weekend as well. So, excellent.
Well, I live a mile away from Route 1.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So I'm on it all the time.
Yeah.
It's our main road here.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And San Luis Obispo is a beautiful drive from here too.
Yeah. I drove inland sort of down there from Cupertino, but I made sure that after I'd met with Joe Johnson, the owner of and his son Joseph, I met them both, and then I drove along the coast on the way back because I did have a little bit more time, but unfortunately not enough time to do a lot of photography.
Well, next time you're making that trip, be sure to let me know.
I will do.
Shoot some photos together.
That would be amazing. I'd love to do that. So really, thanks again. I'll be telling everybody about your book. I think that it's an important piece, and it's almost like a literary workshop in many ways as well with the way you've laid it out. But incredible. Thank you for making it. Congratulations, and thank you for talking with us today, Marc.
Thank you, Martin, and enjoy the rest of your wonderful day there.
Thank you. Okay, well, that was a great conversation. I really do hope you enjoyed it and got a lot out of that. I know I did. And I just wanted to reiterate that you can get to the blog post for this particular episode at mbp.ac/670. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter, etc. And links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime, you take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye-bye.